You're listening to The Support Report with Be Present, where we share real stories from young adults and how support changed their lives.
Hey, thanks for tuning into another episode of The Support Report. I am Justin Peters, and we, of course, are Be Present, and I'm joined, as always, by my amazing co-host, Kiara Riga. Kiara, how are you?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
I can't complain. So we got an awesome guest today, a longtime friend of Be Present, so some of the listeners may or may not know him, but do you want to give a brief introduction and bring him into the conversation?
Yes. Today, I'm so excited that we have Hernan Barangan. Did I say it correctly? Thank you. Hernan is a leukemia survivor. He is the director and star of the movie Cancer Rebellion. He was the director of the 100% and most recently a producer on the new Apple TV Plus show Life by Ella. So Hernan, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to see you guys.
Give us the last name one more time. I feel like I screw this up every single time I introduce you.
Oh, I say Barangan. I mean, that's just the easiest, I think.
But honestly, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's really phonetic, actually.
It's got a lot of A's and N's. Yeah, I can see where it is tricky. But yeah, I grew up like with people calling me all sorts of things because Hernan, Herman. I got a lot of Herman. So I honestly, I answer to like, hey, over there, you. I'm fine with it.
That's awesome. Well, first name as well, so I understand that.
Yeah, what do you get frequently?
Chiara. Once I got Chiora, but there's no O in my name, so I don't really know where that came from. Yeah, bunch of different random ones.
That's funny. Hernan, so once again, longtime friend of Be Present, and we've collabed on many things, but for those that are listening that don't know a little bit about your cancer story and some of the journey you've had since then, do you want to give us kind of a brief rundown or overview of who you are?
Everybody's got a cancer story, I feel like. Well, those of us who have been graced such anyway. And the thing I love is that like the way we tell our stories changes I feel like I've been out of it long enough that like over the years it's evolved. And for me, it's when people ask me in a social situation, I'm like, it just trips off the tongue, but I try to slow it down sometimes. So I'm going to try and slow it down. I was diagnosed when I was 15, almost turning 16. I was like passing out between classes and stuff, your typical, something's wrong with me, but I don't know what. I thought I was a punk because I had bruises all over, and it was like kind of cool. It felt cool, at least. But no. I ended up in the hospital. They figured it all out. I had a month where, like, what's interesting about my experience is like my first month of being diagnosed was I was in a what is it when you're a dissociative state? That's what they call it. Literally, because some drug I had a reaction. I don't know. I thought I was a clown at one point.
Seriously?
I thought I was in the World War II. I thought I was a soldier in World War II at one point. Yeah, exactly. And when I came out of it, that's when I realized, oh no, I have cancer. Great.
That's crazy.
And
that's
so
wild. I've never heard that.
It happened more back then than it happens now, I guess. But yeah. So and it was a rare reaction, actually to a lumbar. But so because of that, like when I got out of that, all my friends knew before I did. And obviously everybody had been talking about it. My family they'd had a month to kind of process, and I didn't, right? So it was a whole different way of getting into the whole cancer experience, because I was already in the thick of it by the time I was aware that it was going on. It was a couple of years of fun treatment, and I got a bone marrow transplant, and which I attribute to my looks. Like, I feel like it really has kept me young. But other than the radiation setting me back, I would say. um, but yeah, like coming out of the whole cancer experience, and I call it cancer high, like graduating cancer high, because of
Hmm.
the timing of it. I went off to college, and I told nobody. I ran hard, and I didn't want anybody to know. I didn't want to be the cancer boy at school. I didn't want to. And honestly, doing that delayed a lot of the processing that I think people should do in those first few years. Um, but I'm a big proponent. If you feel like you got to run, run. You know, don't worry, you'll come back. At least to the point where you need to meet other people. It's going to happen at some point. But when you're tired of what you've been through, put it away.
Hmm.
Come back to it. That's what I did. And so yeah, after college, after like trying to get back into trying to build a career, that's when I started to get stuck in the mud. Like what did that really do to me? How do I move forward from that? How do I maybe incorporate that into what I do? I mean, I went going through treatment. I became addicted to movies, and so whereas um, before cancer, I was supposed to grow up and be an engineer or something, right? Um, with much to my dad's dismay, I went off to film school because of what I'd been through. Like I knew that number one, I loved storytelling, and number two, like I'd learned from almost from losing my life that I don't care what the risks are. I'm just chasing what I want,
Hmm.
right? That's what life is for. As whatever the result, I'm gonna chase what I love, and that's what I did. Um,
Did you pick up a
so
camera after you were
yeah,
diagnosed with cancer? Wow,
yeah, yeah.
I didn't
I mean,
realize
like I
that.
played with it when I was a kid and all, but I didn't. It never took it seriously. But yeah, after cancer, I started making short films. It's funny, like if you look at some of those early short films, they were pretty dark. I wonder why. Uh, uh, but yeah, like obviously I had a lot of shit to process. Beep. And it took a while for me to actually be able to face the demon in cancer and being able to say the word cancer and all that. Um, it was a step for me, and the I'd been writing a bunch of stuff because I wanted to get into TV writing, animation writing, anything as in my 20s. And I can't and I had like a bunch of specs. I had feature screenplays, and all of them were just kind of fun stuff, almost like action, whatever. Nothing really hitting hard. And then I got this one idea for, and it still is stuck in my craw, about two teenagers that meet on a cancer ward and make a pact to go on a cross country crime spree, right? To pay for treatment, obviously. But beyond that, because it just to find themselves, to escape the hospital. That was a big thing for me when I was in the hospital. Escape, 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 escape. I had dreams of running into the desert and stuff like that. So that I poured that into that screenplay, and it was the first time that I had actually written about what I'd gone through, and that opened the floodgates. Being able to kind of, for the first time, writing something that was emotionally resonant in something that I'd been through, in an attempt to communicate that to other people. I felt like I'd unlocked something. Um, the trick was though, and I feel like I'm getting long winded here, but
Go
at the
ahead.
at the end of that draft, um, I had a feeling that I didn't know what I was talking about. you know,
Mm.
because I'd only been through what I'd been through, and I had shut it out for years, and I'd never really spoken to anybody else my age that had gone through it. I think at most I'd spoken to like a couple 10-year-olds when I was going through it. Obviously, I was in Stanford Children's at the point, um, but not being able to, not seeing that there were other people in my age group was a huge stumbling block. And I think if I had even just seen somebody in the hallway that was anywhere near somebody I could identify with, I may have been able to process it earlier instead of doing that runaway thing, you know.
Totally.
In any case, I got to the end of that script and decided that I needed to like meet some people. I figured, you know, there must be other people that had gone through this that were not like super old and not super young. So I started asking around. I asked my doctor, and they put me in touch with like a child. It's funny, child life specialist. Like, who? I don't want to talk to a child life specialist. I'm not a child.
Right.
But
I
that,
do so much of that. I'm
right?
20, like I was diagnosed at 27, but it was still like, oh, let's talk to our child life specialist.
Yeah,
Like, yes, they do great work, but maybe we could rename it.
yeah. Just a little rebranding, thank you. Yeah, I didn't, and yeah, I didn't really understand what they could do for me. But yeah, they like hooked me up with some other people to talk to, and um, at that point, having, you know, built up a few skills, gone to film school and had a camera and all that, I started thinking, okay, well, what if I mean, their stories were so cool. Why don't I just kind of record a few? I don't know what I'll do with them. So I'd ask them, hey, you know, do you want us like meet in the park and just talk for a while? And that became like my side project right there. Like, just amassing footage from people, and then like seeing what I could do, and having done a lot of like short form documentary work and advertising work, I started to apply the skills that I amassed in professional life to telling these stories in a stylistic way, because I felt like a lot of media that I'd seen around the cancer experience was didn't feel sophisticated enough to me. It felt like just flat, like people talking to a camera, and like it's just not engaging, right? I
Mhm.
felt like this is a really important subject, and it deserves to be treated with like everything we can throw at it, right? So I had made about like 25 of these short, each one on a different person, just kind of like teasing out what their most pressing thoughts were on about cancer or whatever. And they were each like were like micro documentaries around like 5 minutes long. And that's when I met Roger Daltrey. And they were establishing Teen Cancer America, and they told me, "Well, we don't know what we're going to do with you, but we like what you do. We'll figure it out." Yeah, a year later, that's when I met with them. Like I was going in to pitch them. Okay, I've got this idea. I've been doing this around California, but I don't understand what it's like in the rest of the country right now, and I want to know how different is it. How different is this experience between here to Texas? What's it like in Montana? What's it like in New York? Let's make a snapshot of what it's like to go through cancer as a young adult right now, at least. And let's just like get out there, make a document that tells us what it is, how it, and by doing that, tell us what needs to change, right? And it's funny because like at the same time they were going to ask me, hey, we kind of have this idea that maybe we could send you on the road. Right. And it totally was a perfect mesh for what I wanted to do and what they needed to happen. They wanted to have like footage that they could convince people that that there were changes that needed to be made, right? Which I totally believed in. Like, you know, our medical centers are still way behind right now, but like 8 years ago they were really behind. See how, but that's another testament to like how things have changed, even in that short amount of time. I just hope that like, you know, give us another 10 years and like everywhere is going to have like an AYA, you know, wing, or just somewhere that like, so when you get diagnosed as a young adult, you don't fall between the cracks. You know, people are there. You find people to talk to. You're supported in a way that like brings you back to life, you know, which I feel like hasn't been the case, and it still isn't in so many ways.
Totally. And I love how much you're saying about like finding your cancer community or even just another person, because I really think like I credit meeting my best cancer friend Lauren with, you know, me being able to turn my mindset around cancer, because we can talk to each other in a way that I can't talk to anybody else in my life about, right? And that's so huge. But there's so few resources to find that. Like, I'm meeting most of my cancer friends on Instagram, which is not a bad thing, but there should, like, the hospital should be supporting us in this, because, you know, everyone's all over the place. And how do you meet someone local who you can really build a connection with? So I think that's, you know, huge part of what you're doing. But I was really curious. So reading, you know, bios and things like that of you, you mentioned a lot about how escaping was a big part of your cancer journey. And particularly that movies and TV was a big escape for you. And so I'm just curious how you went from that being an escape from cancer to now it becoming kind of the whole piece of the pie, right?
Right. How it's funny though how like this tool that I used to run away is so easily turned around to become a tool to run back and fight. I don't think that's always, I feel like maybe that's always the case. I don't know, maybe it's not, but it's just that like that filmmaking, storytelling to me was the constant for me, right? Like I said, I fell in love with it sitting in the hospital and watching like the junk that was on hospital TV on a you know, it's not even a great screen they put in your hospital room.
Like 12-inch like monitor.
Like, exactly. There and yeah,
and it's always noisy and you're listening to it through one speaker. It's junky. But that's where I really discovered my love for that. And so moving forward and then going to film school and chasing that dream, like I said, out of a like, I face death and screw it, I'm going to risk it because that's what I love, was a no-brainer for me. And so using that to escape and run away was so easy, because like you can tell stories about anything. You can tell stories about elves or like whatever you want, in any direction. The thing that turned it into a tool to running back to the subject was my realization that that there were other patients out there that also felt as isolated as I did. And here was this thing that I love that is also as much as escapist as it is, it's also like a real connector, especially in our our modern world. And so it was very easy to go, okay, well, this thing that I love, I'm just going to shift it this way, and I'm going to take what I love about it and combine it with an actual passion, which the passion being connecting other patients and making us feel not so alone. The that I felt like when I put those two things together, I'd figured out life, like in general. Because like it's one thing to have something you love or have a job you love or have a hobby that you love, but it's another thing to like follow that in a way that fuses purpose with interest in a way, and service too, because I feel like it becomes
and skill and your aspect as well,
and skill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
Because I mean, you did have filmmaking skills.
And maybe that's what I built in the interim when I was escaping. I built that. And at least that came from something. At least see those years weren't wasted.
So you did go out on the road, though. I mean, I know you ended the story there, but you actually did end up going out on the road, and I think that was eventually what led you to creating Cancer Rebellion, correct?
Yes, Cancer Rebellion was that road trip, which took like 2 years. It was a zigzag of all 50 states, and I didn't actually drive to Hawaii, but I would have if I had like a hydroplane or something.
Did you drive to Alaska?
No, that's another place I didn't drive. Although I really wanted to. I plotted a course through there, but apparently it takes 6 days to get to Alaska.
Really?
Yeah.
No idea.
It's
being
so far.
Canadian, that doesn't shock me. You've got to go like so far.
And there are no roads for a lot of that.
Exactly.
Too, right? I wanted to do it. I totally was going to do it, but the budget was like, yeah, you could either do that or like cut out 6 states. Not worth it. So I flew, and that was still Alaska's a beautiful place. It was amazing to go there and find that like there were young adults that were as isolated as I was in LA. It's crazy. Because it's a social thing. It's not like it has very little to do with like how close you are to other people, how big a city you are. But yeah, anyway, that was that road trip. It was an amazing experience. Just being able to like get in the car, drive for 6 hours, meet somebody new, meet like a really great person that you identify with on so many, because like, what it's like when you meet somebody that's also gone through or has similar experiences, especially in cancer, have an immediate like connection, really understand them, spend a whole day filming with them, finding the things that they love, because that part of my process was like interview and then always show us what you love to do. If it's golf, if it's whatever, we're going to go golfing, and so we do that. And then like at the end, say goodbye, have a great new friend, hop in the car and have like a 6 to 8 hours drive in which you get to process everything that you just did in the last 2 days. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's, you've got a lot to process because like somebody's not doing very well, or or obviously when you walk somebody through all their experiences, there is a lot of potholes in that experience when you talk. And I did long interviews. Like one of the interviews went 12 hours because he just wanted to talk. He'd never been able. That's what I think most of these people don't like. When you get asked about your cancer experience, you have, or even I do, like kind of, I have a shortcuts to it, but like I don't go into like the everyday, this shit was hard, and then this shit was even harder, and that's what an interview looks like for me. Like I wanted to get everything. I wanted to get the joys. I wanted to get the like every turn along the way. In the end, I amassed like 32 gigs of footage, which I hear is a lot.
That's insane.
Yes.
And I was underwater on that, meaning that like I got back home from that road trip and I knew what the story was going to be, obviously, because I planned for it. And we all know what the cancer experience is like. How hard is it going to be to like tell that story? But to tell that story for 50 people, and then you realize I interviewed 2 per state. So it was like 100 people that I had interviewed in the end. And make sure I used as much of everybody as I could. And because I wanted everybody to be involved, if it was going to really be a snapshot of all our experiences. And at the same time, make it a movie that you could watch, like make it entertaining. I was like lost for a long, like I sit and watch that footage for like 3-4 months before I could even touch it. And I was just taking notes, and I was like completely, like I said, I was underwater. I was like swimming in this footage. I came to a point where I'd had it, and I like got in my car and I drove out into the desert. And out here, the desert's on the other side of LA, kind of on the way to Vegas. And I just like, as soon as, and I and this was just like get me out of the house, because I've been in the house looking at this stuff too long. As soon as I got out of the city, and it was just, the desert and the road and everything, it started coming to me. Like I remembered for the first time in years, the song that I was playing the first time I like puked in my hands, and before I even knew that I was diagnosed. And from that song, I began everything, the whole story. Like I suddenly knew, okay, from that song, I'm going to talk about that song, number one, and then I'm going to go to this, and I'm going to go to this. Oh, and then I'm going to go to that guy in Wyoming because he had a great story. Oh, and then I'm going to go to that girl in North Carolina. Great part for the beginning. And then I'm going to go pop, 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 pop. And I took out my phone and I narrated like the structure of what the film would be. And I have that file somewhere on my computer. But
That's
like,
cool.
as soon as I had that recording done, I just like turned the car around, came back home, and like started cutting. And I had it in like, it took me like, a month and a half of just straight chopping. But I tell you, the film is not too far from that recording that I made in that car in terms of the map.
That's so special. So you had mentioned that obviously having all of these stories and these people digging up their trauma was obviously quite difficult for you. How did you go about kind of prioritizing your own mental health and taking care of yourself while working on this project, or just in general, because you've done a lot of cancer stuff since Cancer Rebellion, obviously?
Yeah. I feel like, and like I touched on that a little bit in the course of that drive, because like the drive days became my self-care days, like the days when I could unwrap everything and like, take the time to like check in with myself, make sure that like I'm cool and ready for, for doing it again. And beyond that, enjoying the experience too, because like you got to enjoy it. Otherwise it's just torture.
Absolutely.
Life, I mean, in general.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. And I think also in the course of doing all this over the years, I've built what I feel like is a pretty comfortable like coping mechanism for like for when things are tough not just from me or for other people. Like I feel like only with experience have I been able to strike a balance in that way. And that's hard to explain. But other than, just like keeping tabs with how do I feel? Um, how, how separate am I from my feelings? You know what I mean? How swept up in my own feelings am I? And like, I just like try to stay in touch with that. And I feel like as long as you can stay centered in that way, you can kind of get through a lot of stuff.
Totally. And it sounds so simple, but that's such a hard thing to
Yeah,
be honest with yourself
yeah,
about. And I
yeah,
think that's something I struggle with is like, I'll ask myself, am I good? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I've got a good job and I'm, got my dog and this and
yeah,
that. But like, really, there's stuff that's dark and you can have all of that
yeah.
stuff and still not be okay. So I think that's a really, really important thing to keep asking yourself.
And the more you flex that muscle, the easier it becomes, I think. I mean, it wasn't very easy for me in the beginning.
I can imagine after 2 years, you got to be pretty much a pro at it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Hopefully that.
So I would love to switch gears and talk about your most recent project, Life by Ella.
Cool.
This is for our listeners, an Apple TV Plus show. I have binged through the whole thing in like 3 days. I loved it. I felt like it was the first realistic depiction of cancer in mainstream media. But I would love for you to just talk a little bit about this process. Like, what was it like going from unscripted to scripted? What was it like trying to, tell these stories in an authentic way when you're going through that mainstream media that wants cancer to be this inspirational thing? Like, tell us what this process was like to get this story told.
Oof. And like like as you said, going from unscripted to scripted, it's kind of funny because like I think I started in scripted. Like remember the Cancer Rebellion, if you look at this, I mean, honestly, that screenplay that I told you about earlier, that was a road trip. Cancer Rebellion was a road trip. And so my path from scripted to unscripted and back to scripted is a pretty clear line. They're the same, I feel like. As long as you're honest to the emotions that you're conveying, then both forms are the same, right? Cancer Rebellion is structured very specifically like a feature, like an action film. If you watch it and you hit the minute marks, it's like by the book, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, turn, act second half of act 2, it's dark. Third act, it's the solution. I built it like I was building a regular film. And so coming back to a narrative project like Life by Ella, it was really easy to again apply that. Like I said, the most important thing is just be honest, because you're acting as not just as a steward for your own story, but you're becoming a steward for other people's stories, especially when you're dealing with nonfiction, because nonfiction is where we dream, right? And so the characters like Ella and her family, these are dreams that we share now, that we all kind of, as long as we're all watching the show, right? They become your dreams as much as they're the dreams that I and the other writers on the show had. And so when something doesn't ring true, we all know it, right? There's an alarm that goes off. This show sucks, right? We've all seen it when we watch like anything about, and this was a giant chip on my shoulder growing up, obviously. When we watch something and like there's a cancer narrative and they get it wrong, somebody's this or that, whatever, it's because they weren't honest with the emotion of it, right? It less times I like complained when I like see like a cancer story that gets it wrong on a minor detail or whatever, like I'm like, okay, fine, you guys didn't do your research on set or whatever, but as long as there's an emotional resonance, then okay, done. You guys did all right. And so coming to Life by Ella, I was like adamant that like I don't want to be involved unless we're going to treat this the way it deserves to be treated. A lot of why I went into, and one of the reasons why I went into film in the beginning was like, oh wow, these St. Jude's commercials about cancer kids are really screwed up. I wonder if I could grow up and change that someday. Unfortunately, those commercials still run, right?
Oh,
They do.
The Jennifer Aniston one always gets me.
Made me fall out of my chair just now. Yeah, it pisses me off. I think that like the portrayal of our experience is really important, and you don't change that portrayal unless you start hiring people that are intimate with that experience. I'm always looking. Okay, if there's a movie that has anything a little to do with cancer, okay, who did you consult? Who wrote this thing, and how involved are they with this? Is this like, did they have a family member that went through it, a grandma that went through it? Screw you. Hire somebody that had this experience. There's enough of us out here, that are willing to like go to the dark places to make this story real. So yeah, fortunate was I that I had met Jeff and Tim, who they were Nickelodeon producers back in the day. Like, oh my god, they did like shows like Sweet Life by Zach and Cody and stuff like that, and we had met like kind of about the same time as I was finishing the cut for Cancer Rebellion, and started talking about like, well, yeah, what if there was a show? And they had specifically had this idea about a girl who was getting ready to go back to school after cancer. And I was like so excited by this idea because so many times the cancer story is like during or whatever. This was like a after, and that is like one of my favorite subjects, right? That energy burst you get when you're like NDE and life is yours to deal with, right? It's the same moment that I decided I was going to be a film student, right? Because screw it. And so yeah, we started building the whole story around what her experiences could be, trying to deal with the friends that had ghosted her, or deal with the friends that had been with her the whole time, and super important subjects that we just like, I feel like, especially in media, just kind of ghosts over most of the time. And like it took years for that project to also gain traction, because I think the first time it sold to Amazon, and then it was dead for a while, and then fortunately Apple picked it up. And yeah, we were just like really, really fortunate to actually be able to like, come together for a whole 10 episodes.
An incredible 10 episodes. Did Apple push back at all on any of, and I know their NDAs are ironclad, so I'm not sure if you're able to say this, but
I can talk about it now because it's out.
Any of kind of the authentic stuff, or were there any battles you lost there in terms of keeping things in?
No, it was they were the best, because like the only pushback we would have would be on like stuff that was like had nothing to do with the cancer. They were like, oh good, go dark, go ahead, go dark, even though it's like a family comedy. Think about it. The only pushback would be on like, oh, this thing is too adult or whatever, you know what I mean? Like they can't cuss. Stuff like that. I was like, yeah, I did have a scene where I wanted them like cussing and punching pillows, but I realized, okay, fine, we're dealing with children here. um, yeah, but if you look at my episode, the ninth episode, like that thing was really, really, I mined my own experience really hard for that show. I like, but before I, brought that to the room, I like had a sleepless night, and I was having all these dreams where stuff was coming back to me about like, my own experience and being in that bone marrow transplant and being in the hospital up in Stanford Children's, and all of that stuff ended up going into that screenplay. Like, and I feel like that script, the ninth episode, was the one that was least messed with by the network. They were like, sign off, done, you're good. Which I was really happy about, because so much of that was like, that episode was what I've been trying to get to my entire career, like being able to like express something that was so, emotionally hard for me in the first place, and then emotionally hard for me to process in the years coming out of it. And then now, having come full circle, being able to like take not just my experience, but like a ton of other people's experiences and like ball them up into this one story about, Poppy, and what she went through and how she was able to like take the brightness that she found in her and pass it to somebody else.
That was such an incredible episode. It gave me chills. I think that's really, really incredible that you were able to just tell your story in that way. And the whole show was fantastic. So hats off to everybody. That was, I hope to see more of that from all of you.
I hope we get a second season. Come on, Apple.
Please.
So outside of potential season 2, what's next for you, Hernan?
Well, right now I got into this NBC writers program, which has been pretty amazing. And so,
yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm like heading over to Universal Studios in about 10 minutes. Yeah, we get to meet on the lot. It's pretty great. And yeah, so that program has just been a huge boon, because now I've just got like a ton more cred, and I'm like meeting showrunners and meeting current executives over at NBC, pitching stuff, and like, yeah, it's just basically right now it's all open. We'll see how it goes, and hopefully come March, which is the end of the program, I'll be on another show, or maybe Life by Ella will have its second season.
I'm gonna hope for both. We'll be cheering you on.
Yeah, I want that second season now. I'm ready. Oh my God, guys, we have so many ideas for that second season too. Oh
man, I can't wait to see it.
So Hernan, where can so we mentioned Cancer Rebellion. Where can people watch Cancer Rebellion? And then same with Life by Ella too. Give us kind of the rundown of where they can find some of your works.
Yeah, Cancer Rebellion is it's up. I think it's a rental still on Amazon and iTunes, which is actually Apple Movies or something now. I forget what it is.
Okay.
Anyway, it's up there. Also, if you're curious, I still have my Vimeo up, and so over the course of interviewing everybody, of the 100 people that I interviewed in Cancer Rebellion, and the 30 people that I interviewed even before and after it, I've always made one short piece, like a 5-minute to some of them are 10 minutes. They're all up on my Vimeo. Like if you watch Cancer Rebellion and you're like, wow, I'd love to hear more about David in North Carolina, there's a video for him, and you could find his story, like his entire little story. Which I feel like that's like a little extra for anybody who's will, to dig more. That's there. But yeah, and other than that, Life by Ella is up on Apple Plus.
Awesome.
So
and then you personally, is there a place where you like to connect with people on the interwebs?
Oh, well, no, I've been on Twitter a lot, but Lord knows if that's going to continue.
Yeah, who knows? I have no idea what's going on with that company now.
God. Yeah, who knows? I mean, yeah, anybody can find me. I'm on Instagram too.
Okay, perfect. So Hernan, final question for you. And through your experience, and honestly, so many other people's experiences that you got to spend so much time and absorb and listen and understand, what do you feel like great support looks like?
Listening, number one. I think that's the key word for me. It's just listen. A lot of times we come to each other with an awkwardness of what to say, but saying is this much of support. Listening is about this much. And so good support is basically being present for each other and listening. That's what I think.
Love that. Well, Hernan, always great connecting with you and hearing from you. Thank you so much for being so involved in our organization as well. Gary, you want to finish this out here?
Yeah, thanks so much. This has been the Support Report with Be Present, and we'll see you all in the next episode.